Hello everyone, and welcome to this quick announcement video, like I did last year, just to remind people or show people for the first time if they don't know that the Cup of Nations for 2022, the current year, is being hosted now. The registration is open, and as I said in the last couple of years, if you want to play, I definitely recommend it. It's a lot of fun. Just in case people don't know what it is, basically, it's the oldest tournament in Rome 2 or in Total War history. I'd say it's the most prestigious, and it's an idea. The tournament has persisted since Rome 1 back in 2000, I think 7 or 2008 was the first Cup of Nations, all the way till now. And the idea is basically every player just gets one faction, and they have to run with that faction for the entire tournament, only using that faction, and every player has one faction. So that's the general idea. Of course, it's a bit more complicated than that in terms of like having to balance all the factions, of course, because playing with a weak faction, you need some buffs to make it viable against stronger factions, or the stronger factions need to be nerfed a bit so that it's not so unfair. So we'll get into that in a bit, but yeah, like I said, it's a very fun tournament. It's very straightforward in the sense that you only have to play one faction. You get to develop your intuition with that faction. So, even if you're not great with it at the start of the tournament, maybe by the time that the important games come, the games that matter, you'll, have some new ideas, some better ideas with the faction. You'll get a better handle on all the different units, all that kind of stuff. So, it's definitely fun in that regard. Um, Tournament wise, it's very straightforward again. It's just like you play group stages, so you play everybody in your group a bunch of times. Only a few people get eliminated each group stage, and then once there's like 8 or 16 people left, you just have a playoff stage, best of 5. It was double elimination last year. Not sure if it'll be that way again this year, but either way, there's just a playoff stage with some, best of X games, and you go through that, and yeah, it's always a pretty fun tournament. I think it's pretty easy if you don't play a lot of tournaments to play in it, because it's not so complicated. You don't need to know so much about like matchups or meta as much. Like it's more like each faction will have their own kind of style based on the restrictions or buffs from the rules. And so it makes it kind of interesting to play in that regard as well. So uh, yeah, if you don't have an account on the Republic Arena site, which is where it's hosted, I'll put in the description. I'll put the link to the tournament, the registration page, and we'll go through it in a second uh, how to log in, how to make an account, whatever. That's all pretty straightforward, and then we'll just quickly look at the rules and everything there. So again, description below is the link. I highly recommend it. It's a fun tournament. It's a classic, the most classic tournament with like the most history and all that. So it's quite fun. And why not? Might as well play it if you want. So yeah, let's go look at the rules and stuff. So here's the fucking page. I'll put this link in the description. We can just quickly look at what you have to do to register. Make an account, obviously. I think it's usually up here. Go to registration. All you need is these 5 things: your name, clan, whatever, time zone, just so it's easier to communicate with your opponents. You know when, or like when it'll be daytime for them, pretty much, or night. And DLCs. Obviously, you can't get a faction that you don't have the DLC for, so just tell us which factions you do not have, and so you don't get factions from the DLCs. So that's registration. Very simple. Just put our shit here. It's very straightforward. See, here's mine. All the normal stuff there. So all good. We can quickly look at the participants so far. Already up to 21 in 2 and a little bit of days, so nice. So far, so good. Should be a competitive tournament. We have some great players, obviously. Yeah, Tila, Heracles, Ragnar, all those guys I think will play. Um, a lot of good players anyway, and should be good. And now we can quickly go over the rules. There's a prize pool. I don't know what it is so far. Let's see, 25, 30, so $55 at the moment. or something like that, but whatever. And quickly the rules. The rules are still subject to some, changing obviously before the tournament. We're still like in the middle of testing them, but we can look at the general ideas. So obviously there are some rules that apply to every faction, and then there are some like each faction has their own rules that may override the general rules, but you know, other if not, say it all goes back to these rules. So 4 same units, 11 infantry, 4 pikes, 13 cavalry plus foot missile units, 2 missile cav like jav cav or horse archers. Rules about elephants and chariots, and then just the generals included. So pretty standard rules there. Obviously, if just these rules were played, then some factions would be stronger than others. So we go down to the individual rules, and you get sort of things like this. So some factions, for example, might get more missile cav, more same unit, more infantry, more melee infantry, and then some. So those are for maybe weaker factions or factions that need that kind of help. And then stronger factions might have some other, like less melee infantry allowed, 2 cataphracts max for Armenia, for example, and or less cavalry and foot missiles. So the cavalry plus foot missiles max is, I think, the way we're trying to nerf the eastern factions this year. Just saying, you can either go cav heavy or missile heavy, but you can't really take a lot of cav and missiles and horse archers, for example. Obviously, horse archers count towards this cavalry limit as well. So you can bring like a really balanced army, but not have you could have like 5 cavalry, 4 archers, and 2 horse archers just like for Armenia, for example. That would get you to 11. And that's fine, and it allows Armenia to play to its strengths in cavalry and missiles somewhat, but you have to bring some infantry, so you can't just like full kite, because obviously against some factions that would be quite strong. And these rules again are subject to change, so I'm not exactly sure if this will be the final rules, but something like that, right? That's the point. And now, like for example, for a barbarian faction, we have say 3 same for like infantry, so you can't just spam certain infantry units. 6 melee infantry max, but only 3 good sword units. So chosen swordsman, oathsworn, so limiting those units. Because again, for example, against a Greek faction, if you spam chosen swords and oathsworn, like you're just gonna win because the Greeks don't have enough melee power to counteract that really. So again, some different debuffs there. Some factions have 4 horse archers or missile cav allowed, like Colchis, for example. Some units are just capped, like Galatian Legionnaires, Galatia, or like again, like the Elite Sword max, like we did for Averni. And sometimes, like you can bring 5 melee, but you can bring additional like cheap infantry, basically. Like for example, for Colchis, you can bring only 5 melee, but you can bring up to 8 if you have 3 hillmen. So you can bring 5 axemen and 3 hillmen, for example, or 4 cartly and 4 hillmen, something like that. Is all good. So just things like that. I mean, we could go through all these, but I think it's not really much of a point yet until the rules are more solidified, and then I'll do a video on all the factions. But yeah, that's the kind of rules. And then there's obviously like some factions are like the main pool, which are factions that you can be assigned for the tournament. And then there's the reserve pool, which is like factions we felt like are pretty weak. And basically, if you want to switch from the faction you're assigned to one of these factions, the weaker factions, you are allowed to do that as long as you're like the first person in your group to select that faction. So, we don't think that these factions are really, they're either too hard to balance effectively or we try to balance them, but we still think it's probably going to be either hard to play or kind of weak. So yeah, you can always choose these factions again. And some of them are probably fine, like Seleucids in Syracuse, for example. They're probably not terrible. Like, I don't think they're going to be the worst faction, but they might be harder to play or not very interesting, so we just decide to throw them in reserve. Don't give them to people outright, but people can choose them if they don't want the faction that they're given, basically. So that's pretty much it. And you can see, yeah, here are the main pool, reserve pool, and then a couple of factions are just straight banned, which is like Boei and Saba, I think are the only two, and the Nomads, obviously. Um, so cool. If there's any questions, yeah, let me know. Put them in the comments, whatever I can help you out. But yeah, go ahead and register if you're interested. Again, link to the page here will be in the description. You just go to registration, put your info in there, and you'll be good to go. So yep. hope you guys are interested in playing. Otherwise, I'll be posting my battles, maybe some other interesting battles from throughout the tournament since all the replays are going to be saved from everyone. So I'll try to cover at least my run. Hopefully it's a good one. But also some other cool battles if they pop up from other players. So look forward to that. Anyway, yep. Thanks for watching. Hope you will consider signing up at least, and see you in the next one. Peace.